You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
To Texas Tech offensive coordinator Mac Leftwich, Chris, who was being asked recently about his offensive line as they've progressed through fall camp. And he was asked to sort of mention some guys in different kind of categories, whether it's a technician or more of a mauler, more fundamental, more road grader. And hey, I love some of those guys that are both, by the way. So we hope there's some crossover there for some of these individuals. But let's take a listen to Coach Leftwich talking about guys in that category. There's a couple of other things I picked up on in this answer that I thought were interesting beyond that context as well. I'll bring up here in just a moment. But let's take a listen to Texas Tech offensive coordinator Mac Leftwich talking O-line.
One guy who I've been really pleased with through fall camp is Howard Sampson. Really, both of our tackles, Jacob Pond, who's ended up having to play right tackle pretty much all fall camp, because of some injuries, and then Howard at the left side. I mean, they're going against real guys. I mean, that's two of the best edge rushers in the country every day. On both sides, and if your technique isn't good, you can get exposed quickly. And so I think those guys have gotten a lot better, just from that competition and having to elevate their play. And then I think, from a mauler standpoint, you think of like Will Jados, just a big body in there. He's been playing left guard for us. You get him and Howard on that left side, and you can really, move bodies. I think the right guard, Davion Carter, I think he's a guy that just kind of does it all, really. He's one of those guys you wouldn't expect it from him. He's 5'10", maybe 5'11" on a good day. I'll give him that. But he's a technician, and he's strong, and he uses the leverage to his advantage. So and then I think Sherry's had a great fall camp as well. And I'll give you from a technician too, a guy that I think's had a great fall camp and made huge strides. A young guy is Deantis Upshaw. He's a guy who's stepped in, and he's been going as our two left tackle. Pretty much all fall camp, and I think he's a guy that has a really high ceiling and has really been buying into the coaching. You can see his techniques improved a ton.
Chris, I want to circle back to Ponton and a guy I swear I've never heard of, but apparently is impressing as offensive coordinator this fall camp. But Davion Carter just can't avoid a shout out whenever we're talking O-line, and I thought it was really interesting also to hear Jados and Sampson kind of discussed in the context of maybe what that left side wall could really look like. He's talking about moving bodies, and that's something we love to hear.
Yeah, because I think Joey, whenever he's been asked about the offensive line, they just really talk about size and how much length that they have, and there's obviously some depth there now, and because goes back to the conversation we had at the end of last week about, which is your preference, dominant defensive line, dominant offensive line. If you either way, but you can really control the game in many ways if you've got guys that can do various things up front as a unit, and it sounds like they may be running left quite a bit.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah,
it's worked out well for many teams, to just really build a wall on one side if you can.
And that was the Achilles heel last year, was the left side. So that sounds like that alone has been, seriously upgraded. Ponton, Daniel Sill, Deantis Upshaw, as you heard Coach Leftwich say, Holton Hendricks. Trying to think if I'm missing anybody, but there's a lot. People forget you had a lot of new pieces that came in, and we've talked about a lot of those. But you've recruited really well, and it's nice to hear some of these names that are pushing and emerging. And that's the one thing I am going into the season I'm still concerned about. Now, again, we're 2 weeks out basically, but I'm still concerned about offensive line from the standpoint of, because did you hear Joey in the clip about the scrimmage talk about all the penalties?
Yep.
That's the one thing that, because Zambrano's been out, Scurry's been out. I'm trying to remember who else has missed time that Joey has tossed out there. I know that those aren't Cash Cleveland has been out. And so you're not being able to build a lot of continuity and chemistry with the group that you may or may not roll with, right? Yeah. Ponton may, in fact, start the season as your starting right tackle.
Let's get into that, because that was one of the biggest things that stood out to me about that clip is just how First, today's episode brought to you by Drip Drop. And if you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days on campus or on the job, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, meetings, or more, hydration is where it all starts. And that's where Drip Drop comes in. Drip Drop is doctor developed and scientifically proven for fast hydration, uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. My family's been going hard on the berry flavor, a game changer on those extra busy days. I've tried electrolyte powders before, but nothing tastes as good or works as fast as Drip Drop. And right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. So just head to dripdrop.com and use our promo code LOCKEDONCollege. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONCollege for 20% off. And stock up now and be ready when the heat hits hard with Drip Drop. I want to get how he just kind of offhand our tackles. And I know he's been in there, but I didn't really know, I guess, how we were trending towards live fire and who's going to be there. But
yeah,
what do you think?
Zambrano is, I think that, he missed most of last year, right? And then he missed the spring, and then he's had a back issue here. I talked to him on media day, and he seemed close to being ready to go. And it's funny, the conversation a while ago, he was talking about how quickly it would take him. He's just going to take me a bit, just because there's nothing like getting in football shape other than just playing football. Like, you can't do it. He's like, I've been around this thing, and this is a pro prospect, right? But so I don't know how quickly it would take him to acclimate once he does come back. And because he may have participated in the scrimmage on Saturday, or he's close to it, because I think that when you hear from Coach Leftwich, that was actually stated toward the end of last week. So Zambrano may in fact be back and have started that process. But you just have had so many pieces kind of in and out, and not like any continuity. And we know that's what that position group is going to take. It's like all about chemistry. It's it's an orchestra. You're all in unison and together and understanding and all that stuff. But yeah, you've had some young pieces that have, I guess, stepped up and take advantage of some of these reps, and that's not going to hurt those guys at all.
Can I ask you about the Zambrano kind of Ponton dynamic, in the sense of, like, I don't know what plan A was at right tackle, if it's one or the other, or, hey, we just want to have a competition. But is Zambrano the kind of guy, he doesn't at least list as like demonstrably different from a measurable standpoint than Ponton, I don't think. But is he the kind of guy that just, hey, when they're healthy, that he's going to have a talent advantage or some other kind of advantage, the experience? Or is there a legit, shot here, kind of a 50-50 comp when they do get healthy?
Good question. I mean, what he's got is the experience component. Ponton hadn't really, other than the bowl game and sprinkled in a little bit. Ponton is all potential. And I mean, this is a 6'8" or 6'7", 300+ pound redshirt freshman. He's good. He's the future at one of these tackle spots, right? But maybe it happens sooner than later, and then you give Zambrano some time to acclimate, and maybe by October it looks a little bit different. I'm asking the same questions about Vinny Scurry as well. You're going to need all these guys, all of them. That's just the reality of it. And when do you need them, and are they ready to be used? Is the real question. Because I'm looking at this from the standpoint of, over the next 4 weeks, it really points to that the end of that time frame when it really gets serious, and that's the Utah game. Yes, Oregon State will be a test, but it's all about Salt Lake City, and then there's a bye week immediately after that. So you've got some time here in some weeks to kind of build and acclimate and get guys back into the mix, but there's just not. To this point, you just kind of get the sense there's not just the chemistry where you want it. And I don't know if anybody would ever say it was. Who was it last year? I guess it was Kansas State. Kansas State brought back all 5 starters on the offensive line, and then right out of the gate, their offensive line just wasn't great. And they moved some pieces around and was like, what is going on here? Which I thought was interesting. So you just never know, but ideally you would kind of have it all set, and they would be working together and going through, the trial and error of camp together, but that's just not been what's been on the old menu there.
All right, before we move on, I do want to ask you, what can you tell us about DeAntis Upshaw, a name that I have not heard in my ears before? With all due respect, wasn't familiar with your game. I apologize. Young guy, but apparently right there, as Coach Leftwich says, behind Howard Sampson's been standing out a little bit.
He was part of your recruiting class a couple of years ago. He's a kid out of the Metroplex. He's a redshirt freshman. He's like, I don't know, 6'5", 300 plus. These are some of these names that are – you want to, leave them in the oven for another bit to let them cook a bit. But he's definitely taking advantage. Like, who would be a backup left tackle in a game scenario? I could see Ponton over there. I could see Jados being moved over, and then you move in another guard. And again, some of this comes down to who is actually available and what's the scenario in the game. We just trying to get out of a game. We still need to win it. But it's nice to hear something about a young player there that I think is, because he's seeing, as you heard Coach Leftwich say, when these backups are having to get pushed up from maybe like, say, a third team or even fourth team or scout team up into like second team, they are seeing really good players on the edge. Because while he may not be seeing David Bailey or Romello Height, he's still seeing like your Amir Washingtons and your Cheto Ophelis and some of these guys that are the next up and comer or the starters from last year. And so that's where I think probably Clay McGuire is like, man, this isn't really fair, in some of these practices. But as I've heard Joey talk about that in these media press conferences, like, I have to tell Clay all the time, hey man, remember who these guys are going against. These are, because your defensive line depth is just, it's pretty impressive. Because you haven't, knock on wood, you haven't had a lot of issues there with guys missing. You just had a lot of offensive line guys missing. So you've had to juggle it and mix and mash and kind of elevate everybody up. And they're still going against these high-level guys on the defensive line. So practice is probably, but that's only ultimately going to help them. But yeah, good for DeAnthis.
I'm glad you bring up the defensive line and even throw in an opportunity for a wood pun, because I want to wrap it up on that side of the football with our defensive coordinator,